Howdy, howdy! This is Fathery of Tex-Trek kicking off the hashtag TQIF lineup, your weekly lineup for YouTube goodness. We're going to do some Babylon 5 talk on Tex-Trek. Kind of odd for us to talk about something other than Star Trek, but we did it one time before, so we're following up on our B5 Season 1 talk with the B5 Season 2 talk, and then when we conclude later tonight, I can give you the exact time later, but you can join Starfleet Boy on Starfleet Boy After Dark for some late night fun on his channel, where they're going to be talking about some of those recent Star Trek Picard revelations. So if you don't want spoilers, maybe don't join in this week. But if you're looking to find out all the juicy details, then that's going to be the spot for that. But in the meantime, I am joined by Brian, and making his Tex-Trek debut, the one, the only Geek in Review. So, gentlemen, how are you doing? I hear a dove, Brian. That's probably at your house.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, not me.
Oh, hold on a sec. I have the window open. Let me cut down on bird noise.
But while Brian is doing that, I'm just going to remind everyone, Babylon 5 Season 2, that is the first season of our new captain, our new main character, John Sheridan. You know, we have a big change in the Babylon 5 dynamics right off the bat in the first episode, Points of Departure. So we're just going to kind of start things off with that. We end Season 1 with a pretty big cliffhanger. We're going to get into like a little bit of spoilers for Seasons 1 and 2 here, but we end with the death of the president, the murder attempt of Garibaldi. Things are looking pretty dark and grim. There's been this new reveal of this new enemy that is working with Londo and the Minbari, and we go into Season 2 with like, oh, the captain or the commander has gone to Minbar. This new captain has come to the station. I'm just gonna ask the two of y'all, what are your reactions to the arrival of Sheridan?
I think I got in on the second episode of this season. That was kind of when I really figured out when it was on. So I don't have a lot of strong original memories of this premiere per se. I'd seen a couple, like the movie and two other episodes or one other episode before this one.
I remember, as I said before the show, I wasn't too sure about the change in the lead character, but I think that was just my age at the time, being a teenager, and I didn't particularly enjoy Sheridan in the first outing, but we'll get into that later on, and the change of pace in the character as well. I think the last commander was a bit of a slow burner, but then they had to change the stories with things that happened, but again, we'll get into that. But yeah, it was a change of pace and interesting at the time. I enjoy it now, but I didn't at the time when I watched it.
Yeah. Actually, now that I think about it, I think I did start on the season premiere, now that I think about it. But it was kind of the first episode that I'd really was sitting down and seriously trying to figure this show out. I'm not sure if I'd even really noticed that there was a new guy. I guess they keep talking about him being the new guy, so I must have been aware of it on some level.
Yeah, well, for me, like, I kind of only tried an episode here or there. I always had a hard time breaking into Babylon 5. Like I said, when we talked about Season 1, and, I tried again with Crusade when that started. I tried again with the Rangers movie that was on Sci-Fi Channel when that came out. And I never really connected with it until I actually sat down and watched the Season 1 box set, like 8 years or so after the show originally came out, and I really liked Sinclair, by the end of that, and it was hard to imagine someone else taking over. I knew there was a different captain. I knew it was Tron. I knew it was Bruce Boxleitner. But I was like, man, like, I really like this Sinclair guy, and so I can understand being a little resistant to Sheridan when he first arrives, and it is like a little bit of a different energy. It's funny, there's so many things we can compare Babylon 5 to Star Trek with. And I actually titled this stream because I wanted to make it somehow Star Trek related. It's not quite Star Trek, but it's still really good. Because, yeah, there is a lot of connective tissue. We talked about that previously. There's also some major differences. But it's hard not to compare that to Jeffrey Hunter and William Shatner. Because they're both they're kind of similar. Like you could see how you could write the same stories for both, which is the way that they played them is so different. And it's a lot like that.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, I mean, just like you with being Doctor Who fan, being a Doctor Who fan, you're generally your first Doctor is your favorite. And I mean, yes, I'd seen one episode and the pilot, but effectively, as far as this is a show I'm going to watch seriously and I'm really going to figure out how it works and stuff, Sheridan was my first, station commander. And so for me, I come at it very differently. I'd also off and on as a kid watched Scarecrow and Mrs. King. So that's where I knew I'd seen Tron, but I did not make the connection. I'd only seen Tron once, I think, when I saw this, but whereas I'd seen lots of Scarecrow and Mrs. King when I was younger. So I was immediately, I know who this guy is. So that even helped me sell me on him a little bit, was because I remembered enjoying him as a kid. And, yeah, I love Sheridan, and when I finally got around to seeing season 1 properly, which was, I think it was as late as 2004 or something, when I finally got to see season 1 again from the start. I inherited somebody's complete Babylon 5 VHS collection. So
it must have been quite physically very large. And
we had crates and crates of the stuff stacked up in the living room, but we're like, well, now's the time to go check it out. So, but yeah, I was like, the Sinclair, he's kind of slow. Doesn't have the fun charisma. So, and to be fair, I wasn't giving him a terribly fair shake, but I had remembered, so Sheridan had really burned into my brain. And so in 2003, when I finally got to sit down and watch the show, I knew there was a different commander, but it was like, oof, wow. It was, and I, as I think I expressed last times, I have some, I feel season 1 is probably the worst season of Babylon 5 anything, including Crusade and the other spin-offs and stuff like that. It's not necessarily awful, but it's rough. So yeah, getting to season 2, getting to Sheridan, Sheridan's my man. On some days I think I like him more than Kirk. And I'll definitely support the idea that he's a lot more Captain Kirk, but he feels a little less it's probably more the writing than anything, but he feels a little less like a god descended to Earth like Kirk did in the old 60s series, who was kind of unstoppable, that kind of old style hero.
Right.
Whereas Sheridan definitely has some fallibilities, some bad days that are even bad days where he's making mistakes, as opposed to just having other people's mistakes inflicted on him. So they're not quite the same in that manner, but they definitely have a level of charm and charisma to them that is undeniable, in my opinion.
Well, he gets a great. He gets a great intro.
Let me just read this comment real quick about. I wanted to let Jeremiah weigh in. With Jeremiah, thank you for being here. But he said even Sinclair in the first couple of episodes is kind of a-hole. And I really didn't like him for a while, but I started to warm up to him. And he definitely is kind of he's kind of harsh. He has hard angles, There's a little bit more warmth, I think, to Sheridan than to Sinclair.
Well, as I was saying, I think
you can review what were you saying.
Talking about the sort of scope of Sheridan, he gets a great intro aboard the Agamemnon, because for a new season and a new sort of star or new captain of the show, we're seeing something that we've never seen before. We're seeing that big Omega class ship. I think it was in hyperspace or just jumping out. We're seeing the bridge in the interior, so we're seeing the world that this guy lives in, and we know where he's going. And then over the course of the show, obviously we see a bit bits more of Earth and what it's like. But I thought that was really clever of introducing this guy of this is his world and this is where he's going to go.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, jumped out of my head.
Well, they do a good job of like making him not be a Sinclair copy. Like he's not a fighter pilot, and he's not a commander who was just like selected by the Minbari. Like he wasn't even like supposed to be on the short list of dudes to get the job to command the station. No, he's a guy who is kind of a war hero who's known for being the guy the Minbari don't like. He's the only dude who like that war was such an ass kicking against the humans that there was only one time Earth Force was able to take down a Minbari ship, and here's the guy who did it. And that's who. And when we find out more about some of the sinister forces going on Earth that we explore in this season, and kind of the conspiracy they're trying to uncover about like the what really happened with the assassination of the president and all of that, it kind of makes sense. They would be like, oh, this guy we can probably trust to not be out there like cooperating with like these foreign governments. The Minbari hate him. He's going to hate the Minbari, so we're going to put him there.
Yeah, he's absolutely, on paper, from the point of view of Earth Gov and the Earth Alliance, came off as the fuck you candidate. You know,
yeah,
I would have put the Merrick Garland or whatever.
And he kind of is eventually to the Centauri and not the Minbari like they were hoping. But,
he's a completely different person it turns out than what he looks like on paper. But he certainly it plays very nicely into the master story. When you go back and look at it, it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly, it works really neatly the way that folds together. I guess I remember coming in, and this season hit me at just the right point in my development, where I was just at the point where I was getting a little bored with TNG and television, in a lot of television that I was watching in general, and even Doctor Who to some degree, and was wanting something a little more complex that was a little more intellectually challenging. And here came Babylon 5, and DS9 was doing that, and I was absolutely loving DS9 at this point as well. But to see that there was another show like DS9 that was going to require that I keep pay attention to what happens this week, because it's going to matter next week, and that these characters, you better learn who this guy is, because he's not just a one-shot guest star, and the more complex interrelationships. And maybe television had been doing some of this, but I was watching stuff with spaceships and time machines. So for me, this was what DS9 was doing, and what Babylon 5 was doing in this season immediately caught my attention. Just the idea that, he, at the end of the first episode, he gives the speech to the empty room, because and I was like, that's amazing. Next Generation never would have done that, not in a million years. And even, Doctor Who today would have done that perhaps, but even back then I was watching old reruns of Doctor Who from the 70s and early 80s at that point. So it was, not something that even Doctor Who would have done at the Doctor Who that I was watching at the time. So there was a breath of fresh air, an interest, and a promise. I think I felt a lot about this season the way a lot of people would later feel about Lost, about where's this all going and what's it all adding up to.
Well, except in this case, the guy making the show, Joe Michael Straczynski, actually had that planned out. And
oh yes, absolutely. From everything I've heard, Lost, which I did not watch, kind of crashed and burned.
Big style. Yeah. When time travel gets
and
involved and it's your main thing in the story, your show's gonna clutch at its straws.
But yeah, I would say Babylon 5 especially given the difficulties behind the scenes, did a great job of sticking its landing.
The way that I try and sorry,
you go ahead.
The way that I try and sell the show to people that haven't seen it is it's like Game of Thrones in space. It was 20 years ahead of its time, but it's got a good final season. It doesn't, there's no original source material that the writers can go off course and mess up, because one guy wrote most of it and had control over most of it, and it shows. And that's why it was so ahead of its time, and that's why it is getting the recognition it now deserves.
And I know our friend Dave, who did the season 1 discussion with us, one thing that he points out is that in the later seasons, he does kind of start to get tired of JMS's same writing tropes coming up again and again, a lot of like the same ticks and stuff, which I can understand that. So that in some ways that is kind of an advantage of season 2, is that it's very much the Joe Michael Straczynski plan, firing on all cylinders, but we still have some of those other voices in here. There's still a few scripts from Dorothy Fontana and Peter David and whoever else was still writing.
Yeah.
So I think that does add a little bit of texture to things.
And also at this point, you haven't had time to get tired of the tropes.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's far enough along that they've kind of like worked out some of the bugs in season 1.
Yeah. I will say where was I going to say? I forgot. I don't know. Sorry. My brain's not working well today.
Well, Brian's trying to remember. Let me just ask y'all. We have obviously a different captain here with the introduction of Sheridan. But some of the other characters, they're the same characters, but they've kind of changed. Londo is in a different place. This is where we kind of see Londo take a darker turn. It starts at the end of season 1, but really here he's in a very different spot at the end of season 2 than he is at the beginning of season 2. And because of the course he goes on, that has a major impact on Jakar as well. And then we also have Delenn who literally goes through a metamorphosis, a literal metamorphosis in a cocoon, and that's how the season kind of kicks off with her. So what do y'all think about some of the with those characters, some of the changes and the arcs involving them in this season?
I remember just enough about the pilot and Delenn in the pilot to be able to enjoy Delenn in a cocoon and Delenn coming out of the cocoon, whereas I think if, for some people who might have started on season 2, that might have been okay, whatever. She's got hair. I guess that's new. They say it's new. But yeah, I remember just enough to remember that, oh yeah, she was this person and she had the ring that squashed somebody. And yeah, okay. Yeah, now she's like different. All right. And yeah, I was amazed that they were changing Delenn. I was fascinated by I mean, Londo was what got me interested in the show in the first place, and
it can't be that bad speech, right?
Yes, it can't be that bad speech made me think I want to know more about this guy, and it's not actually
in season 1.
That was season 1. Yeah, I saw like 1 and maybe 1.5 episodes of season 1, and I remember thinking this is really strong. I want to know more about this guy. Even though that scene turned out to be not terribly representational, but he rarely plays the wise old man. But you do see Londo, lots of Londo in here, and he's doing all sorts of very interesting stuff with Morden, and Morden is fascinating, and the interactions with Jakar. I kind of missed Jakar being a bad guy in season 1. So I just kind of took him at face value as this guy who's been questing around, worried about the ancient forces that are moving out beyond the rim and stuff like that. And that was kind of the Jakar I came in on, so I kind of missed that some of that transition. Though we do get him trying to kill the Emperor, so it's not like he's not kind of thrown around.
But in the same episode, he also sees the error of his ways. He goes and like hugs his enemy. He goes and hugs Londo, and that's such a tragic moment because that was the big turning point in the Centauri Narn story in the beginning of like the full out war between those two powers.
I remember watching that the first time going, holy fuck, this is going to be so bad. This is going to be so bad for these characters. This is, wow.
Yeah, it's impactful. Yeah. Those big moments really hit hard in this show, and it's so good building up to those. There's a few of those here. I think I'll save like the big one in the finale for later in the show, but there's some big revelations that pay off. You know, that's one of the things you have to do in these shows where you have like these mysteries, these long drawn out mysteries. You have to have a satisfying payoff, or people aren't going to remember the fun of the mystery. They're only going to remember the disappointment of the reveal. The first one that we get at the beginning of the season is they explain more about why the Minbari surrendered during the war, and Delenn and Lanier explain about the idea of like the Minbari believe that Minbari souls are being reborn into humans, and there's a little bit more to that story that they don't get into this season, so let's not spoil that. But yeah, like that revelation, it was such an enticing mystery going into the show. Is like, why would the Minbari beat the shit out of Earth? Send their ships all the way to literally like the edge of Earth, like ready to attack the planet and extinct us, and then they surrendered it to humanity. Why the hell would they do that? That doesn't make any sense. And so like I think we get kind of like an interesting reveal, like, well, like these people think like their souls are being reborn into us, like that's really weird. And but we get like all the Minbari politics with Delenn and the Grey Council and her leaving the Grey Council to continue her mission on the Babylon station, and she has the romantic feelings for Sheridan, just like she did in season 1 for Sinclair. So she has a thing for Earth boys, or at least like men in uniform.
I was going to say the uniform. Yeah, that's it.
I mean, one could say, what can one retcon the flirtatious stuff to be more of an interest in this guy is carrying around the soul of of an important Minbari, and that's why in season 1, I don't know, I never really thought about it until now.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
the way that I'd always thought about it was that she is a diplomat, and maybe she was trying to garak him and get a little bit of information out of these guys. At the time, that made sense to me, but obviously as the character developed, you find out that's just not on her agenda at all.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people complain that Delenn and Sheridan, I mean, kind of hook up too abruptly. And I mean, I guess on some level, by the standards of perhaps real life relationships, that's true. But coming from TOS Star Trek and TNG Star Trek, where where the relationship it goes through all the stages within 40 something minutes. I was actually amazed at the time at how natural this relationship was developing, and how it felt real and seemed to be taking its time to develop in a way it didn't feel rushed at all to me. Quite the opposite.
Yeah, it actually seems like it takes a little while for those romantic flames to really get burning, but it kind of makes sense. Like, neither one of these people are probably like looking for a romantic partner at this time, and they certainly probably wouldn't be looking for it with like who the other person is, like their position or even like their species or anything. So it makes sense they wouldn't just like kind of like dive straight into it. They'd probably like to have to ease into it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but
I'm like halfway through season 3 now, and like even there, not to talk about the future seasons too much, but it's still taking a while to really build.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it would have been like a GI bringing back a German girlfriend in 1946 to New York. That's those two opposing sides, it's two sides that came together, and they've got to fight that attraction. At the same time, they know that neither. I mean, the humans don't seem to be that bothered by it, but the Minbari later on seem to be very bothered by the sort of mixing thing. And it didn't go into that as much as I would have liked, but I thought it was a good concept that these two people bring it together.
And I'd forgotten that so many humans have prejudice against Delenn for like taking on like a somewhat human look. Like they kind of are like, oh, like that's so like disrespectful of all the humans or people killed and stuff like that. What do y'all think about like that look? Like, does like with the weird like bone crust around like the back of her hair, like does that work? Does that look
How did he do
Correct.
it? Was it a headband, like a sort of reverse Geordie LaForge on the back of the head?
I mean, they clearly took some work to work the kinks out of it, because when she first shows up, the hair clearly is growing out the top of it, and then in subsequent episodes, very quickly, the hair, instead of flowing up over the bone, is going under it and coming kind of out the back of the bone, and which looked much better from a human aesthetics point of view, and probably from a Minbari one as well. But and I think they realized that if they wanted to have her have long hair, which is of course the big distinction of the chair, as Great Maker says, the hair weaves through the bone is what JMS later said on the message boards to justify how the hair was suddenly coming out the bottom instead of the top. And I mean, wow, that must be a bit of a nightmare to weave through the hair through those little holes in that bone. I suppose if Minbari are nothing if not patient.
Yeah. So. And they also have advanced technology. Probably not with like hair grooming, given that they're all bald, but they might.
She doesn't have a ring for that. She doesn't have a ring for that. She can just put on and zoom, the hair goes where it needs to go.
And speaking of Sheridan's love life, we open with this story of his wife, the Icarus. He's still grieving. It's almost like a little too melodramatic at the beginning, but they have a lot of exposition to get out there. They have to share like this guy is still upset about this, and some of those conversations he has with his sister in the first or second episode of the season, and we have a payoff to that episode as well with Morden, who was a mysterious figure from season 1 that they again, like, you set up these mysteries, you have to have good payoffs. B5 is so good at so many things that I've seen so many shows since this kind of attempt and not do as good. I'm like, y'all have Babylon 5 to look at. You can stand on the shoulders of this show, like look at the way they did it. Like, why can't we do this?
Yeah. Well, for example, they don't hang on to the mystery. They are like, what's the mystery of the Battle of the Line? Right there at the beginning of season 2, there's the mystery of the Battle of the Line. Now, we learn there's some more to it later, but the essential question that we couldn't figure out has been answered, and he's constantly laying in new mysteries as he's answering the old ones. So things, and that is a sort of a plate spinning trick there, because and traditional television before this type of serialization tended to avoid that, because there was always this fear you would screw up the premise of your show, that you would have the two star-crossed lovers get married and suddenly all the energy goes out of the relationship, that you can't, this fear that you can't change things and have it work, continue to work like it is. And even DS9, I could kind of see there was a certain amount of fear about committing too hard to some stuff that would happen. And certainly Next Generation was like, yeah, we want to make sure this show can be watched in any order. So
you got to hit that reset button at the end of the episode.
So you can't you can't, any change has to be reset, and whereas JMS has no time for that. He's absolutely fearless about changing whatever he wants again and again, and here, there, almost, not every episode, but a lot of them, more than half, change things, major things about the premise and setup and relationship of the characters, and it happens again and again. And that was one of the things that was so refreshing and attractive and exciting to me about the show to begin with, was that fearlessness, which I wasn't smart enough to quite realize what that was. It just was different and fresh, is the best I could describe it at the time. But that fearless writing, that confidence.
Cake is Eternal has a comment. The makeup and costuming on this show is amazing. I always feel sorry for Doug Jones and how much time he spends in the chair, but these guys, damn, 20 plus episode seasons too. Yeah. Talk about like the Narn makeup, and I'm blinking on his name.
Andreas Kasultzis.
Andreas, how do you say his last name?
Kasultzis, I think. That's not close, as close as I get.
Tomalak from Next Generation. He's also in Enterprise too.
Yeah, he was.
He was in the episode Progenitor, but he had to spend a lot of time in that makeup. And I remember like JMS talking about like when they'd be on break, like if he stepped like out in like the alley behind the studio, he would see like Jakar smoking a cigarette on his break, and how like strange that must have looked. But yeah, like the makeup on this show is low budget as it is, like it had a significantly lower budget than the Star Trek shows they were making at the time, and that's why they use CGI for the ships instead of models, and some other things here and there they do to cut the corners. But the aliens in the show look amazing. Brian, I think you pointed that out previously.
Yeah,
except for the ones that don't. There's a few that don't.
Well, I think all the lead aliens look amazing, and it's the one part of the show where I don't feel like the production values are really suffering from the low budget. Almost everything, and I guess. Even among the actors, they'll get really good actors for the leads, but sometimes some of the secondary roles could be a little and I don't know how much of that is we don't have enough time to shoot this properly, or we don't have enough money to hire a better director, and or if we just can't hire the actor we need. But shut up, R2. But the makeup is top notch. I think that the makeup easily stands up to even the makeup they're doing in Discovery right now, or Picard. I think they're striking. They're memorable. They've got personality. They don't look terribly fake, or at least not any faker than any of these other humans in makeup costumes are ever going to look. For the leads, and even the lead guest stars, they knock it out of the park with the makeup, I think. And that's good given how character centric the show is. We need to be able to look at Jakar and buy that he's an alien, in a way, and a dodgy makeup would have sabotaged that. And
I think they knew that. They knew to prioritize that.
Yeah, and Father's right. Some of the secondary, some of the background aliens are a little more, but you gotta choose your battles. I feel confident that if they'd given the makeup man more money and time, all of the aliens in the background would have looked just as good. I think that the limit. I don't feel that was a failing on the makeup department. I feel that was a failing of the budget to give the makeup department a chance to spread their genius over the entire station.
All Alone in the Night, let me look it up, the 11th episode, of the season. That's the one where Sheridan, it's an alien abduction, basically. I think that's might be my least favorite of the season. And that alien, the alien that we see only in like one shot, but like it's supposed to be like the scary, mysterious alien that like abducted him. And it looks like an alien mask from a Spirit Halloween store.
It's very Roswell, isn't it? Sort of the tourist thing you get at Area 51.
It looks like the gray alien of which was big in the 90s, and you're like X-Files was on, and all that like conspiracy theory Area 51 stuff. That was all like really popular at the time. And they get that really funny joke in the courtroom scene where the guy sues the alien for abducting his ancestor. It's like, your ancestor abducted my ancestor.
Yeah.
And then he asks the alien, like, how do you plead? And he just holds up the sign with like this weird. He's just holding up a sign with like this weird alien like hieroglyphic on it.
Yeah.
The judge is like, I need a translation team in here, damn it.
Was Judge Judy on TV at that point?
Judge Judy wasn't, but there had been a lot of. Well, she might have been. I think she didn't come about to the late 90s, but there were shows like that had been on American TV for a while at this point. But what were some of the good episodes? I'm talking about one of the bad ones.
I would tend to agree that is one of my least favorite of the season, if not the least favorite. I do wonder, in hindsight, once it was pointed out to me, that those aliens are apparently end up somehow being connected back to the shadows in at least the expanded universe.
Oh, okay.
And I wonder, were those proto Drak or something that were then kind of abandoned and they came? I mean, if so, then that would be the first Drak and then the second Drak, and we don't really figure out what the Drak look like till the third Drak because that's the one JMS liked. But and I think they've actually said those are not Drak; those are some other alien. But at the time, I think that was supposed to. I think it might have been supposed to tie in more tightly with the whole Shadow story.
Oh, speaking of the Shadows, we get the episode with what's with the one with like that invisible demon that comes to the station? It's, is it the Geometry of Shadows?
I'm not good with Babylon 5 titles. I mean,
no, 2 long titles.
Yeah, they're all beautiful. I love to say them, but I don't necessarily. Yeah, my nerd cred is not quite there.
But we get.
Is that the one with the explorer ship?
No, isn't it Barclay from Next Generation?
Okay, yeah, that's the Barclay one. Yeah.
Oh, that episode. Yeah, I know the one you mean. But he's the war veteran. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of the Star Trek connections, but this is where we're doing this thing in seasons 1 and season 2 that I think JMS admits to, like, they eventually gave up on. But the original idea for the show was that each episode will tell a self-contained story, but also move a larger plot arc along. And you could either watch them individually and enjoy the parts of the episode that are, self-contained to that episode and get some satisfaction out of the ending. But you could also never miss an episode and you would get like this great, rich arc. That was the original idea. Didn't exactly work like that, but you can see like stories here, like that one where, we have like this neat story. It's basically about like, it was a monster movie. It was basically a monster movie. And we defeat the monster at the end. But it's also building on this idea of like the coming of the shadows. That's the name of the season, right? That's the season 2 is the coming of the shadows, and that like these dark forces are gathering for this upcoming war. And Jakar with the Book of Jaquan at the end, where he has like the drawing of that monster and like setting up the importance there and how that ties into things.
I think it's the long dark. I think.
The long dark. That's okay. Yeah, the Geometry of Shadows is the Technomage one. Then
that's
another Star Trek connection because it has Kang.
Yes,
that's Kang from the original series.
I remember being quite enchanted with the Technomages on my first viewing too. I was like, "Oh, that's cool! I want to know more about these people." And you have to basically wait till Crusade before you learn more about them. But
with that episode, they never really paid off more of seeing the invisible creatures in the future. I thought we were going to get some sort of reference to that tying in with the shadows later on. I know we see the Drak and some of their other allies, but I always thought it was a bit frustrating that they never really brought that back in. For me, at least.
I mean, the shadows could make themselves invisible. So, I mean, they didn't really, aside from just following Morden around as his invisible bodyguards, I don't know if they did much with that. I guess they kind of ambushed Kosh. But anyway.
I got a question about that, Brian. I got a question about that. And I think I had already answered this question for myself, and I forgot it. But is it possible, without spoiling future seasons for anyone in the audience who hasn't watched them, they make a big deal in the season about like we can't reveal to the shadows that we know what they're up to. We can't reveal that we're already making our plans against their plans. But Kosh confronts them in season 1 because we learn that there's shadows following Morden, and when Kosh says to Morden in season 1, when he says leave this place, he's not talking to Morden, he's talking to the shadows. And Franklin later just kind of casually mentions, he's like, oh yeah, like Ambassador Kosh came in, his environmental suit was damaged and had to be repaired. He wouldn't say why. So yeah, Kosh like physically fought shadows. So wouldn't they know that Kosh knows that they're out and about? Is that ever explained?
Well, I mean, is the rules of the, well, I don't know. Can I talk about this without spoiling things?
Sorry to make it tricky.
Yeah. There are rules for the shadows, and there are rules for Kosh, and in the context of those rules, I think it what we see doesn't indicate that all that little encounter doesn't indicate that all the humans or all of the other protagonists of the show know what's going on.
Okay.
If that's what is that the question you're asking? Is how come that doesn't tip the shadows off?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think within the context of the rules, that is that it makes sense.
I don't know. More of a back alley dust up than a big major league fight.
It's like they might like casually like run into each other from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But between their massive wars against each other, they would have like these little casual encounters. Yeah. Like, what are you doing here? This is our turf, type of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they hiss at each other like cats in an alley.
Yeah. They're territorial.
Yeah.
The Vorlons
so,
like this is like a human station. They're one of ours.
Yeah. This is my place. You go. Go make your own place.
Yeah. Go do something with a Centauri or something.
Yeah. And in hindsight, there's a certain genius to this. We have to make everything look like business as usual so that we don't tip off the shadows, because it justifies for a little bit longer our somewhat formulaic episodic story structure, where there's sort of a bit of a very, very light reset switch at the end, because we have to pretend like that everything's normal. So,
but it has a dramatic payoff the way that they work that into the Zahadum revelation about the Icarus crashed on this planet. Sheridan, he didn't know what happened to his wife, and he learns that her ship crashed on this planet, and this guy Morden is working with the shadows, and he wants to go out, Sheridan wants to run out and probably hop in a ship, go fly to Zahadum right then and there, see what's going on, and they're like, no, you can't do that, you can't raise any red flags with these dudes, because we need to catch them off guard, and we ain't ready yet, and so that allows you to kind of casually hit the reset button. You let Morden go at the end of the episode. You can still, continue doing all the Morden Centauri stuff, but it doesn't feel like you erased everything, because there's still consequence to things.
Well, it's Alfred Hitchcock, I think, was the guy who said that you can have a scene where two people are having a conversation, and but if the audience, the viewer, knows there's a bomb under the table, and the two people sitting at the table don't, then you have suspense. So and that's what he creates. There's this undercurrent that there's a bomb under the table, and we know it, and a few of the people here on the screen know it, but everyone's got to pretend that they don't know it, and so it recontextualizes what reset button we do get, so that it doesn't feel at all like it's just resetting things. It feels instead like we're trying to pull a con job, and the con might get blown at any moment. So very well done, excellently designed storytelling.
What I think is great about this season is that's different from season one is it builds that tension and it rewards you over the course of the seasons. The first season didn't have that, where we know something's coming, but you always get the little things and the little things and the little things, and then you piece it all together. And even at the end of this season, I won't spoil it yet, you get the answer to a majorly huge question, and once that's answered, it's out the way, and they add more to it later on, but I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah, well, we can talk about that in a second, because it's part of season 2. If you're thinking about what I think you're thinking about, but before we get there, I just want to point out another one of these episodes that really stands out to me, even though it's kind of a simple episode that doesn't really shape the course of events too much beyond just this one episode, what happens in it. But the episode Gropos, about the Marines.
Right, yeah.
That episode, it's just such a good exercise in like making you care about characters and then tragically killing them just to make your audience sad at the end. And it's kind of pointless if you think about it, but there's a certain impact that it carries, and I guess it reinforces the realism, the Babylon 5 realism. Like, you know, like you go to war and like people die, and it hurts and you're sad.
Star Trek's A Clean World, Babylon 5 wasn't very clean. I think that really separated the facts.
I'm showing it to my girlfriend right now, Antonia, and she's watched all of Star Trek, and she loves Babylon 5. She actually cried watching this episode, and that's when I knew she was like really into it. Okay. But Gropos, she can hear me. She's like, "What episode, Gropos? The one where all the Marines die at the end." Yeah, but anyways, she calls this like the depressing Star Trek. It's basically what it is. Like, oh yeah, it's like Star Trek, but like there's still people living in poverty, and the government is still terrible. It's like Star Trek, but all of your problems are still around.
It's just the real future. That's it.
Well, I still think it feels more optimistic than the present, but it's much closer to the world we live in. That's for sure. This is kind of what I always felt like Enterprise should feel like, as far as our flawed humanity, as far as the flaws of humanity goes. That we're still, you know, we're still stumbling around in the mud, but we're reaching for the stars, kind of verve. I think Gropos is a good episode that I liked quite a bit the first time when I saw it, and it's a good example of this. Sometimes watching the show now as a 40-something-year-old guy who's watched way too much television of all sorts, well, mostly science fiction, there's a certain sort of slight cheese and campiness about it, not the production values, but like the dialogue and the way the story beats sometimes play out. And that's only something you get in hindsight of watching more modern shows like, say, New Battlestar Galactica and what am I trying? Oh, you know, Stargate Universe and other shows that are willing to push things further. And I think it's unfair to criticize the show because it was very much in this transition period at the very cusp of it, trying to create what has now a lot of what is now standard in television drama, in sci-fi, especially sci-fi television drama. So the fact that it feels like a bit of a hybrid of that older style and the new style is probably unavoidable. But like, I feel like Straczynski is doing enough experimental stuff that in some places he feels like a lot of things seem to unfold in a somewhat tropey manner. I think just to reassure people that there are some things you can grab onto and hang on to. So like, I think in a modern television viewer, at least a seasoned modern television viewer, would watch Gropos and all these guys are going to die. Maybe one of them survives, but they're pretty much all doomed. And I don't think that was necessarily nearly as obvious, especially coming from a Star Trek background, which was kind of the only game in town. Star Trek it's very rare Star Trek at that point would end on anything that dark. Where were we in the Dominion War at the time this season was coming out?
I think season 2 came out around of B5 is around like the same time as season 3 of DS9.
Okay, so like 1 year out of sync.
Yeah, we were just like getting the Defiant.
All right, so
and then JMS was like, "Oh, that's cool. I'm gonna give my show a white star."
Yeah.
Both cool ships.
Yeah, I love them both, and neither of them are, and both of them are capable of changing their size drastically depending on the need of the special effects.
But that's a season 3 thing. If enough people like this and want us to talk more B5, we'll come back for season 3. But one more thing about Gropos though that I wanted to add is, I also get the sense that like a lot of times writers want to tell like their version of a certain type of story. Like I think JMS, like he wanted to write, like he didn't even write that one. I think it was someone else who wrote it.
Yes,
it doesn't feel like him.
Larry Tadillo, or Datillo. I don't even know who that is. Maybe he wrote some other B5 stuff, but I think sometimes writers want to explore like they want to do their war movie. You know, like maybe he was like, oh yeah, like I grew up, you know, watching like all like these World War II movies, and you know, I want to do like my war movie, and this is gonna be mine. And I get that. That makes sense to me, and that's one of the things why I like stuff like science fiction. I like stuff like superhero comics. I like things that are good vehicles for exploring multiple genres. You know, you can get different types of stories. You can watch Babylon 5 and you can get like a war story. You can get like a murder mystery, like in the very first the very first Babylon 5 story is like a murder mystery. You can get like a big political thriller. You can get a bunch of different stuff. Same thing, you know, like superheroes, they can do like all kinds of crazy stuff. If you watch like an episode of, you know, I don't know, Law and Order, it's gonna be like this is gonna be like a court
It's going to be
case,
amazing.
maybe like
Yeah.
a police episode, or you know, if you watch like Saved by the Bell, it's like, okay, it's gonna be like a teen sitcom. It's not probably gonna be much else. Uh I like properties, I like shows, whatever, characters. I like things that can explore a bunch of different genres and you know, take like a little bit like the best of everything. I'm not like a big fan of like modern horror movies. I kind of like older horror movies. I'm not like a big horror fan of newer stuff. But you know, a lot of my favorite shows that I do like, I love when they can do like good scary things and you know, in stuff like Babylon 5 or Star Trek, you know, or stuff like that. So that's one of the advantages I guess you have to doing something like B5.
Yeah,
One thing we've not. You go.
well, I really enjoy the show Lucifer, which is kind of speculative fiction for sure, but it's really mired in this, you know, police procedural thing. And there's some points where I'm watching it where I get really frustrated that you could do other things, you can tell other stories, but there's got to be there's clearly a mandate that there's got to be a murder mystery every single week. And I feel like, you know, having come from Doctor Who especially and Star Trek and all this other stuff, I'm like, you could do so much more. You don't have to be tied to that and it's clear sometimes some of the writers sometimes are like, all right, yeah, whatever, there's this murder and it's the B plot and whatever, we have other things we want to do with this episode, and it really feels like they're just punching the clock or you know, checking the box on that. So I love that B5 has that versatility, especially at this point before we get to completely fall over the cliff into the mythos of the big story arcs.
Well, I'm just gonna go real fast and spit out some stuff and ask y'all what y'all think. But another big episode we get here is comes the Inquisitor. Is it Come the Inquisitor? Yeah, Comes the Inquisitor. With Jack the Ripper of all people.
Yes, that's the one I was talking about. Yeah.
And we get, you know, we kind of see the not the Vorlon, the shadows through Morden, and they ask the question. And JMS has talked a lot about this, about like the 5 questions of Babylon 5, or you know, whatever. Like the shadows ask, "What do you want?" And they're all about like, okay, we're gonna use you. We're gonna find out what you want and like use that against you. And you know, if your main concern is what do you want, you're always gonna be a victim. You're always gonna be not serving the interest of the greater good, because you're going to be kind of selfish and only looking out for yourself, and then someone else might be able to exploit that. Whereas the Vorlons, they ask the question, who are you? And that's kind of, I mean, they're assholes the way they go about that, basically like torture this poor woman with a serial killer. Just very, very questionable method.
Considering his previous work, she got off light.
But they're from their point of view, and you can make the argument that the Vorlon are kind of, you know, bad guys in their own way for looking at it this way. But like their point of view is like we're not trying to use you, we're trying to like make you better, and we want you to realize your own potential. It's kind of
and there's also an element of, we don't want some sort of, you know, Hitler cult of personality. We want to make sure that if we're going to put all this power in your hands, that you're not going to abuse it. And so,
yeah.
And I can kind of see. I mean, their methods are certainly like, oh my god. But on the other hand, I don't know. Is there a better way to do that? I guess it's science fiction. You could probably wave a magic wand and say there's a better way. But I do see, they're gonna say, we're gonna put this enormous amount of power in your hands. We want to make sure that it's the right hands. And
yeah, she had to prove herself worthy.
Yeah. And given what we see, I mean, this is certainly a position that could have been offered. It's had opportunities for huge abuse.
What's
how cool is Jack the Ripper? How cool is he?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, geek, but like how cool is the presentation? And like it's done in a way where like you know he's a Jack the Ripper before he says it. But they still give you the satisfaction of like confirming it for you at the very end. And
what's interesting about
was done.
What's interesting about that is when you think about it, Jack the Ripper has no social relevance or anything to the Len. He's there for the story, for the viewer to let us know that the Vorlons have been back there and doing stuff. And again, they do bring it up a little bit and stuff with other characters that have visited the Vorlon homeworld, but I always wanted more of that. What were they doing with other people? Who else were they kidnapping that was terrible, and why didn't they take certain other terrible people?
It's as a trivia note, the actor playing Jack the Ripper, Wayne Alexander, will go on to play a character named Lorien, which if you've and also will play some of the more pivotal Drock as well. So they clearly recognized that this was somebody they needed to do some stuff with, that they needed to hang on to this person.
Jeremiah in the chat says the ISN episode was really good as well. When the reporter tries to interview Kosh was hilarious. Yeah, we actually get like an episode that's structured like, I don't know what you would. It's kind of like an episode of like 60 minutes.
I was going to say Cops at the time. That was
like
show
Cops.
at the time.
We have like it's kind of like a news show, I guess, but like 60 minutes. I know, like
I would say
like,
60 minutes is a pretty good analogy.
There's other things like that, but that's just like kind of like the popular. Were they? It's more than just like a news story. Like they have like a big hour-long showcase of a particular topic that's highly produced, highly edited.
Well, the way they say 36 hours on Babylon 5 almost makes it sound like that's how they title all their stories. Yeah. 36 hours on blah, 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 36 hours on blah, which brings us back to 60 minutes. It literally has.
Yeah, the synopsis of it on Wikipedia is ISN crew spends 36 hours on Babylon 5 to film a documentary capturing a snapshot of life on the station, as well as the progress of the Narn Centauri War. And that was a crazy way to like show the Narn Centauri War. It's from like the everyday Earth man or woman, or however you identify person, sitting at home watching the news. This is basically how Sheridan's mom and dad on the farm. I know like we don't learn about them in season 2, but I guess that's a little spoiler for season 3. But yeah, like this is like how his parents would learn about the war.
Yeah. And it's something you don't see a lot of in Star Trek is how do people get news when they're not just getting Starfleet Starfleet communiques? How does everyone?
Soji learns about Picard from watching the news, I guess.
Yeah.
Or
we get a little
Soji.
bit in Generations and Jake Sisko doing his stories as well. So we get it, but we see people creating the stories. We don't really see what the finished product looks like.
I agree, Jeremiah. That is that was another standout episode. I was actually about to bring it up, so I'm glad you mentioned it. Yeah. Cake is Eternal in the comments says, speaking of Hitler, the Night Watch, scary. Yes, they set up Night Watch. They really do a good job in season 2 of showing how sinister Earth has become. The agencies of Earth with the Psi Corps. We have Baxter, right? Bester. Oh, I always say I always want him to be Baxter, but he's Buster.
Yeah.
But best Walter Koenig, Star Trek royalty from 1967, shows up again. And they do a lot of stuff with Talia Winters here, and
Oh, yeah.
with the return of Lita, and then that whole episode about like who's the mole.
Yeah.
But not only that, but yeah, we have Night Watch, and they're from the what is
Ministry
it?
of
The Ministry
Peace.
of Peace. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's, yeah.
Yes. I do. I will say the Talia bit with Lita's return, that was kind of the Sinclair moment for me, because by this point I hadn't even realized that Talia wasn't the telepath from the pilot. I just thought she was because I couldn't remember it very clearly.
Right.
And then Lita showed up. I was like, no, that was the telepath for the pilot. I remember her now that I can see her. So
what's the name of that episode with the return of Lita?
Let me see.
It was Divided Loyalties. Okay, so it's kind of like The Thing, almost like John Carpenter's The Thing, where they're like, who's the monster?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. And the thing about that episode to me is that the romance, there's actually like a same-sex romance on Babylon 5. It was toned down for the 90s.
So subtle.
But
yeah,
like me, this is like how dumb and how probably like heteronormative my head is wired. All of that went over my head, and it wasn't until and see, here's a tiny spoiler for season 3, but it's not even a spoiler. But in season 3, Ivanova says, "I think I loved Talia," and when I heard that for the first time, I was like, "What?" Like, I didn't know. But I go back and watch this episode now. I'm like, oh my god, it's so clear that like they're lovers. Like, how did I not know? Like they're like they step out of the shower in like bathrobes, like talking to each other. Like Talia like wakes up in bed and like reaches over to find Ivanova. They clearly like sleep together. But
I was a little like one step above you on first viewing with my naivety. I was like, I didn't actually think they were, screwing each other, but I thought that I like the way one of them wakes up and looks at the other, and I was like, I think she's in love with her. Wow, that's weird. Can they do that? But I think she is. She just doesn't want to. And I thought it was we can't admit it, we can't say anything, but I'm actually into you kind of thing. And then when I went back and watched it again, they're totally screwing. How did I not see that?
Yeah,
it was subtle at the time. Though. Very subtle. And I'm sure there was arguments about it with the studios.
My naive Christian childhood upbringing just left me completely unprepared to decode those the bits of that I was seeing. So.
But you have we haven't really talked about like the human characters much. Franklin, Ivanova, Garibaldi. I think they do a good job of like really fleshing out Ivanova in season 1. Like all the stuff they show with like her dad and I feel like we get like a better handle on Garibaldi in season 2. Not that like he's lost his best friend. She's not just there giving like best friend advice to Sinclair, and he's not like doing like the alcoholic struggle. I think they kind of get a little bit more into like Garibaldi's head about, as he's been betrayed, like who does he trust? And, he's got to learn to like work with this new captain. And also like Dr. Franklin, they get a little bit into like his stelm addiction. Or am I thinking of something in season 3?
But did not bring up the fact that he left Earth during the war because he was sort of, going around Europe in space kind of thing.
Yeah,
and then when he came back to Earth, they wanted that research. Was it right? I know that his dad roughly mentions it in that Gropos episode.
Yeah,
and the fact that he burnt his
dad
research.
Is a Star Trek dude. His dad is Captain Terrell, or he's from Darmok too.
Yes, absolutely. I never liked Dr. Franklin. I always thought he was a bit flat and a bit the extra guy that they just had to pad out.
I liked him.
I like him.
I could relate to not that I've ever had a drug issue, but I could relate to the I must succeed, I must be perfect kind of mentality. I could relate very strongly to that need to try to make everything to do all the things correctly all the time that would drive you into that. It might have been the first time I ever saw somebody use drugs in a TV show and felt like it made sense to me. Like all the rest, it was, there was so much just say no kind of drug people, drugs are stupid kind of things in television, at least the TV I was watching up until that point, that I never really understood why anybody would do these drugs. I just thought like you'd literally, smoke a joint and then you might have a heart attack and die. I was pretty brainwashed, but so watching this was the first time I was like, oh, I could see why that guy would do drugs. Okay. All right. This makes more sense to me. So
and then you ran out into the streets of Fairbank and shot up some heroin.
Well, no, it was still portrayed in a negative manner, but
Yes,
at least I felt like I could relate to the person in doing it. So, I thought Franklin was fun. I think I liked his later stuff when he's. I think the real STEM conference stuff is kind of that's season 3, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't get into it too much until season 3.
But I remember loving the hell out of that. So.
We also get he becomes like a big player in that Underground Railroad for telepaths before Talia went crazy. And that was good continuity of season 1 where it shows like, oh yeah, he's very like humanitarian. He spends his spare time, working with the homeless people and stuff. So that was cool. He's very much like a. He's kind of the Dr. McCoy. I've never thought about this before, but he's the Dr. McCoy, but he's a little bit more cool-headed.
And he gets way more chicks.
Yeah, well, he's a younger dude, but he's definitely like the bleeding heart liberal, full of compassion. Would give the everything he owns and then like the shirt off of his back to help a stranger at the drop of a hat type of dude.
Yeah.
Doctor.
Yeah. He will also flirt with any hot thing that he sees.
Well, he's Dr. McCoy with a Tadakirk.
Yeah.
He wasn't like an exposition machine either. He wasn't just like there to spit out dialogue so everyone go, oh, that's how that works, or that disease happens. He was a fully formed character in the end. But Trek has a habit of doing that, of having engineers and doctors that just spew exposition.
Babylon 5's not as techno-babbly and doesn't center stories around things like, or they don't do it as much, but like stories centered around like space anomalies or like this weird like medical issue, even though they do an episode about like a pandemic that wipes out an entire species, which is a tragedy, especially watching now with our struggles with this, with virus outbreaks and such. But enough of that. Before we get to the end, I guess like the one thing I feel like we didn't mention at all, and I've seen all of Babylon 5 twice before. I watched it twice on DVD, and I'm watching it now on HBO Max for the third time. I had totally forgotten Warren Kiefer was a character, but
I was going to mention that. Yeah, they brought in the Luke Skywalker pilot.
Warren Kiefer was a character, and you watch season 2, and then he's no longer a character, and you just go about your business. So I think it's probably best that we do the same, because I don't know if there's anything meaningful to say about Warren Kiefer other than acknowledging he was there.
I get that he was forced on JMS by the network. But I kind of still feel like, and JMS was spinning so many plates that I get it, but I feel like there was a version of season 2 in another universe where Straczynski took that lemon and made it into lemonade, and Kiefer became something that was beloved and wonderful, and just like he's done with all these other odd characters. And it's clear JMS just had no interest in doing that, no interest in putting the energy into making him into somebody. And that's fine. There's a lot of other things going on in this show.
He also kind of uses the Star Furies as like, here's a way to give like one of my characters something like I can put Sheridan or Ivanova in the Star Fury and like make them go do something. So like having Warren Kiefer out in the Star Fury, it kind of like defeats the purpose of that function.
Even though it's wildly more realistic that you have trained
It is.
Star Fury pilots for the Star Fury.
But if you're strictly realistic, that gets boring after a while, right?
Yeah,
So,
no, agreed. Absolutely. We have our away team. They are the ones that beam down to the planet. The captain and first officer stay on the ship, you know?
And also, like, this is the same time that the guy was like, holy hell, I lost my lead. My main guy is gone. I am losing Sinclair. I have to create Sheridan and make him work in this 5-year show that I have planned out, that I built around Sinclair. And he does a brilliant job of doing that. But yeah, I can get like, okay, I don't have time to figure out what to do with fucking Warren Kiefer over here. Jill's asking us about this. Brian, if you want to explain.
I think the network wanted the network wanted some hot, sexy
was it the
Top
studio
Gun character.
The studio, right?
Yeah,
Not
the studio. They came in and said, we want you to put in some sort of Top Gun type guy in there, you know, Tom Cruise-ish thing that flies around in the Star Fury. And JMS didn't want to do that, but he's like, well, they're paying for it. So, all right, I'll put him in there and I'll figure out a way to work him into the story. And yeah, we know see where that goes.
And then he figured out a way to work him out of the story.
Yeah, as part of the plot.
He served the plot.
Yeah, it does kind of add to the danger of the shadows. It's like, this is what happens if you look at them too closely.
Yeah.
So to be fair, like, that is kind of a cool use of a character. You know, speaking of like that final episode, let's get into it. The Fall of Night. You know, this is where like the shit has really hit the fan with the Narn and the Centauri, and we like Centauri's already been like bombed. It's been hit with the presentation of it is like basically like weapons of mass destruction. Like, you nuke an entire country and then go and stick your flag on it and enslave the people there. This is basically what happened. So like, tension is incredibly high because of what Londo has done. It has a personal connection to us because we saw a guy we kind of like, Londo, you know, putting all of this in motion. And then we have this the big spectacle, if you can tolerate the primitive CGI work of like the bomb exploding on the station, and they build up this big huge moment to finally do like the reveal of a Vorlon, and like the concept of that, of how like it's basically like the Vorlon is God. I think that's a big payoff. You know, they really build up. I think Antonio was even asking me like, do we ever see like what a Vorlon looks like inside of their suit? And I was like, yeah, we're gonna see it. And so what do y'all think about like this season finale and how it wraps things up and tees up the future seasons?
Yeah, I remember it being incredibly exciting. And wow, that's the one where a hunk of the station gets shot off, right? Or am I thinking of a different episode?
No, that was
I
thought that was like the news episode where like part of the station.
Oh,
was like
all right.
when the Centauri and Narn were fighting, right?
Yeah, maybe
one of the two prongs. The two prongs on the.
Yeah, okay, that was the news show. Okay, but still, I mean, it was the scope of the trying. We're clearly on Team Narn by this point. Yeah. You know, we're meant to be rooting for them, but it's clear that our Starfleet is betraying us completely by this point, and any illusions that this might be like Starfleet and Star Trek is kind of gone at this point. You're very much like, oh, you really can't trust your space military to be all perfect. And
well, that comes to a head in season 3 in a big way.
Yeah, but I mean, even by this point, you're like really not feeling all that confident about the decisions the people above our heroes are making. Yeah, very often. And so there's that wonderful, you know, pinch of can we keep this Narn ship, these Narn on this ship safe or not? And yeah, I remember it just being really exciting, and I remember I love the centrifuge stuff, and just the fact that the inside was round and you got to see this big spinning interior of the station, and the idea that you could jump out and it would be weightless. A
little bit more real life science than they get into in Star Trek.
Yeah, until the Expanse came out, I think this is probably the most hard science sci-fi show out there that was, set entirely in outer space. And I knew just enough physics to really be able to appreciate them getting all that spinning space station stuff right. I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly how it would work, and I'm finally getting to see it. And just in case they think you've got too much space science, here is Kosh. Here's something completely different than a hard sci-fi.
This is some straight up made up alien magic.
Yeah, yes.
Might as well be Lord of the Rings at this point.
Yes,
It
exactly.
kind of was Gandalf the White, though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Yeah. Yep. I don't think his appearance, the details of his appearance, they don't get into till next season, as I recall, right?
Well, they show.
I mean,
everyone
you see it.
sees it as God.
Yeah.
And so we can interpolate that. I think that oh yeah, the Vorlon intentionally look like God.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the mechanics of how that works, I think it doesn't get explored until later. I think
the tragedy with Londo, where everyone's like, oh yeah, I saw Jaquan, or I saw Buddha, or whatever, and then he's like, I looked and I saw nothing. That's when you know, he's in a dark place. He has no faith in anything.
Yeah. It also feels like you've definitely left hard science well behind by the time you get to that line. But it's so good you don't care about the weirdness of having centrifugal gravity and I saw nothing because I don't have faith. It's simultaneously happening.
But B5 covers a lot of bases, and I like that it's able to do a lot of the things I like about Star Trek. A lot of things I like about, I don't know, something that's a little bit more kind of about mythology and kind of about more kind of emotional ideas than like cerebral ideas like Star Wars, and kind of can cover that base, and it can kind of cover stuff like Blade Runner, which is kind of dystopian, and it's an interesting show in that it's able to. It's almost like Kosh, how Kosh can appear to be all these different things. It can be all these different things simultaneously.
Yeah, it definitely was set up to be able to draw from the wider palette of future sci-fi in a way that by this point Star Trek had Rick Berman very much saying, "There's the things Roddenberry will not let us do, and we cannot do those things."
Roddenberry kind of had already Roddenberry kind of already dripped the lines for that box. Rick Berman just enforced it.
But this is clearly a show that was carefully put together to not have that box.
Yeah. Intentionally.
And in some scenes is deliberately dancing across the wall where the wall of that box would have been, just to say, look what we can do on our show. And so, the one big thing I've noticed, and they've explicitly said, JMS said he didn't want any cutesy robots, and there really isn't a lot of robot in Babylon 5 as it stands. That seems to be the one big genre of that kind of sci-fi, that subgenre of that kind of sci-fi that we don't get much of. We I guess they don't play around with AIs. They dabble in AIs, I guess.
There was the episode where the station computer came to life. Remember it had an AI personality originally?
Season 3,
When they do comedy, it doesn't work for me though. It's I like when they're naturally funny, but when they try to shoehorn comedy into an episode, it falls a bit flat.
Yeah, Brian, I think it was you who said that JMS is not as funny as he thinks he is.
Yeah, he is funny. He's not as funny as he thinks he is. As a friend of mine pointed out, he tells a good joke and then he beats it into the ground. So you're left wishing that you you're off, not always, but sometimes left wishing that joke hadn't happened, despite the fact that it started funny. But then there's kind of this, did you see that? Did you see that kind of thing that ends up kind of sucking the life out of it because it wasn't that funny. It didn't need to be, you didn't need to run with it,
Like when Ivanova had to have sex with the old alien to seal their peace treaty. Yeah, they kind of they draw that out way too long. Yeah, this would have been funny if you stopped like 5 minutes ago, maybe.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was like,
Uh,
it felt very Next Generation.
yeah. I think TNG did occasionally, but not often, great at its attempt at comedy. Jeremiah in the chat says, "Was this the season where Jakar had to resign? If so, Jakar's speech on freedom is so good." Yeah, I can't remember if that was like the end of season 2 or the beginning of season 3, but we get that.
I think it was earlier when it doesn't that happen right after they seize Narn, after
Narn,
Centauri sees Narn, then Jakar is no longer representing any government, at least not officially.
Citizen Jakar. He's no longer an ambassador.
Yeah,
he is Citizen Jakar.
And I think that's when he gives the speech.
Yeah.
No chain can hold, and know this and know that.
Yeah, it was a great speech about how like people will always, fight for freedom, have like this desire for freedom, and will never stop until they get it. And the way that he ends that, it's so badass. Like when he's like looking at Londo, and he's like, "We taught them this lesson once before, and now it seems we must teach them again." And just
Powerful,
that level of
powerful,
conviction. Londo being the guy, like, he doesn't have faith in anything. He doesn't believe in anything. Well, fuck, this is a guy who has, like, we know, like, this guy has some conviction right now. Like he's ready, like put his nuts on the line and die for this. And
yeah, whereas Londo's very much a path of least resistance kind of guy.
Yeah, that's not the conversation Londo wants to have, for sure.
Yeah.
Like he's never felt that strongly about anything in his life.
Yeah. We also get the one where he has to kill Samantha Carter's father. His buddy shows up. Londo's old best friend shows up, and they get in the sword fight.
Knives.
And all of that.
Someone mentioned earlier that she didn't like this episode.
I thought Knives was fun. I don't know. Yeah,
was that Alexandra or Jill? Someone brought up Knives.
Yeah. Somebody said they didn't like it. Knives. I don't know. I like Knives a lot. Yeah, that was before I fell in love with the actor playing. What's his name? Anyway, Londo's buddy, the actor playing Londo's buddy, who is a major reoccurring
something.
Yeah, he's a major reoccurring character on Stargate SG-1. So
interesting.
But
I'd forgotten that Londo is like a master swordsman.
Yeah, I kind of wish they'd pulled that one out one more time later on in the show, because I don't think that ever gets brought up again. But it would have been fun to have, at some point where something the shit hits the fan, and suddenly Londo's like, "Well, I guess we're doing this." Pulls out a sword and just wades into it. I think that
shadow attack on Babylon 5. You just wanted them fighting them off.
Yeah. Just not like a huge thing where he saves the station, but just this moment where things are going bad and kind of like, well, let's see,
like Sulu running topless down the Enterprise.
Yeah. I want to see that with Londo.
Yeah,
it would certainly be anatomically interesting with Londo to be topless.
Yeah. He's got stuff going on, apparently.
Yes, it would be. We never really get to see the topless Centauri.
No, you see the statue from the back, but not the front.
Yeah.
Well, when we start talking about naked aliens, that's probably when it's best to wrap things up and sign off for the evening. But I do want to thank everyone for watching us live and being part of the conversation with us. These are always a lot of fun, and it's a great way for us to nerd out together and interact with each other. And if anyone's watching this later, please feel free to comment and share your opinions and let us know what you liked or didn't like about season 2 of Babylon 5, and if you want us to do a season 3 talk eventually. And the meantime, just to self-promote for a bit, you should all check out the other space station show from the 90s, Deep Space Nine. Because next week, Dave will be back on Tex-Trek. He and I are doing our next podcast episode. We are talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 3. We're going to break that up to Part 1 and Part 2. And we're going to dedicate the Bell Riots, the past tense episodes, to their own show. And we're going to bring on a special guest for that. So you'll definitely want to follow that if you're into DS9. And Geek and Review, do you have anything you'd like to tell us about
Go check out my channel. Just put it in the search engine or search bar Geek and Review, and you can follow me on Twitter at the Geeks Reviews. That's all the one word. Doing a lot of Star Trek theory videos coming up for Picard, which I think we're going to be discussing later on anyway, so I might steal some ideas, but keep an eye out for them.
Yeah. There's a lot of Star Trek stuff to talk about right now. 5 shows and like more shows than we had for most of my life.
You could imagine, yeah.
And in production all at the same time. So that's great. And until next time, as always, what's the B5 ending? Not live long and prosper, but just abso-fragging-lutely.
Why are you here?
Why are you watching this?
I don't know. See you on the rim. They kind of have a goodbye. Yeah, see you on the rim.
Yeah, we'll do that one.
What do you want?
See you on the rim. Who are you? But later, y'all.
See you again.